Hello everyone and welcome to What's Your Story? And I'm GW and today I have Luigi with me and he's going to share his story. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me, GW. It's a pleasure to be on the show, first of all. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to share my story. And I guess my story starts off in a small little island called Dominican Republic. My name is, like he said, my name is Luigi Paulino. I'm 27 now. But my family immigrated from Dominican Republic, and as you can imagine, Hispanic culture is a very Christian culture. You know, while most of the world was celebrating Santa Claus and Christmas here in America, in Dominican Republic we would celebrate the day the three kings brought gifts to Jesus. And just to give you an idea of what our culture was like, and you know, it was a really humble upbringing. We didn't have a lot, but there was a lot of people that had a lot less than us. So we were blessed. Even back then, the Lord had his hand over my family's life. I was really young when my mother decided to come to America and to try to build a life for us. I actually didn't meet her until, I want to say I was about 3 or 4 years old. I just remember she left, or I was told that she left when I was really young, and then I just remember the day that she came and picked me up. In that time, I lived with my grandmother. I know a lot of people in Hispanic culture, you spend a lot of time with family. Family is really important. But once my mother picked me up, we came to America. We came all the way to New York, and you know, she had done the best that she could to build a life for us here.
Now, how old were you when you came to New York?
About 3 or 4 years old, somewhere in that time frame.
Okay, gotcha.
I was really young, and it was just me and my mom. I think she was so she was the same age as me when I had my daughter. I had my daughter at 22. So my mother was maybe 25, 26 years old when she brought me to America, and it was just me and her. My dad wasn't in the picture. Once I came to America, I didn't really hear from him much. I'm not really sure as to the reason as to why, whether it was distance or whatnot, but I know it was just me and my mom for a long time, and she had her sister, so my aunt, so you know, we kind of stayed around family. And a lot of people, when they immigrate to America, end up gravitating towards the big city. Just a lot of opportunity, a lot of work, a lot of jobs, but it's also a really rough place. I think in that time frame, I just remember that how difficult it was bouncing from place to place, and I just understood, and I eventually ended up starting school, and I think we settled down in New Jersey inevitably, but I ended up starting school, and I struggled at first. Got kicked out of a lot of schools. I was a really rowdy kid, had a hard time keeping quiet, following the rules and the structure of the place, but really smart kid, but I just had a lot of issues. I think I got kicked out of a few schools, and I think my mom lost a few jobs over it. So things were, needless to say, things were really tough on a single mom in New Jersey that came all the way from Dominican Republic. She ended up joining the military at a roughly young age for me, but I ended up staying with my aunt while she was in basic training, and that was a huge turning point for my family. From that point, we went from just kind of struggling and getting by to, you know, there was a time of separation. But once my mother came and picked me up from my aunts when she joined the military, every need was always covered. You know, we lived on base. I want to say, and I could be mistaken, but I want to say it was Kentucky, the first place that she was stationed in. And we lived on base out there, and you know, my mother was doing the best that she could. At this point, she met my stepfather, and they started dating, and that was a little shaky, you know, it was a little different. For a long time, it had just been me and her and some family, and I think my stepfather did the best he could to try to make me feel welcome. You know what I mean? I think he had some really real feelings for my mother, and I think that shows in time. They've been married, gosh, I don't even know how long, but they've been together for as long as I can remember now. And you know, if you were to ever see my mother, she's this 5'3", 5'4", maybe 115-pound Hispanic lady that you just would not guess was in the military. And my mother went on to serve two deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan later on, and that's why I say the military really affected my family, is because my stepfather, he served in 3 tours. So for 12 years, he was for the first 12 years of my family's marriage, of my parents' marriage, my stepfather he was off at war. Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Operation Desert Storm. He fought in almost every major Middle Eastern war, and my mother went off on 2 tours, and she came back with severe PTSD. I guess a camp that she was in really, they got attacked, and she had to drive a Humvee. And the reason this is so important to my story is because when my family came home, they had some different problems, and it really, really affected my upbringing. Both of my parents suffered from really bad PTSD, and as a kid, that put a lot of pressure on me. My dad being gone for so long, at this point they had my 2 younger sisters, and my childhood was basically sacrificed because I had to help my mother raise my sisters. And as much help as I could offer, there's only so much help a teenage boy can offer to a parent in that situation. But for the most part, I had to watch my sisters a lot. I had to be there to support my mom as best as I could, and it was a lot of responsibility. It just absolutely was. And then when my parents came back with the issues that they had from fighting in war, it was really rough on me. My dad was at the time very abusive, and I think the best way I could sum it up, there was one time he was home and his alarm was going off, and they always had to be up early for PT, physical training, extremely early, and it wasn't like my dad not to wake up, so I went to try to wake him up, but suffering from night terrors, he wakes up, and I just remember the look in his face. He wasn't there. And he, picked me up by my shoulders, and he's like, and he was just kind of freaking out, and it scared the crap out of me. But that was what it was like for those long years for a while, with my parents battling that. And at that point in time, I started feeling like I didn't belong at home, especially being the only child that my mother had with my biological father. Now here is this family, and I just kind of felt like I didn't belong, and I didn't want to spend time at home because things were so difficult. So I started seeking a place where I belonged. I started trying to find it out in the streets with friends, and luckily, because we lived on base, I wasn't really around really rough parts of the neighborhood. Because if I had been in the wrong area, I could have really gotten in touch with some of the wrong people. So
you were guarded to a point.
Exactly. So I think that because also the same thing that put us in that position also protected me from falling into the wrong circles. Living on a military base. Eventually, my family, they do the whole military thing. They retire, and my aunt lived in Utah at the time, and so we moved out there to be closer to family. And I think that was really important with my mom, and these times were just really difficult. So she sought comfort the same way. I think in a way we were all kind of free floating, lost. And at this point, we're not going to church. My mother, I do believe that I remember my mother trying to take me to church. I used to think that it was more to give me like some type of spiritual backbone, but I think maybe she was doing her own searching as well, and for whatever reason, we didn't go often, we didn't go long, and I do think that my parents tried to do the best that they could, but inevitably, the sins of the father also ultimately become the sons, and it was really hard growing up in that type of environment, very emotionally and physically abusive. But when we settled down in Utah, things started to get balanced out more. Gone were the days where they were coming back from war, and now we were just kind of trying to heal as a family. My dad started getting better. My mother got worse, but then she got better, and it strained in the family, and I just kind of became a little bit of the lightning rod, being significantly older than my sisters. Just kind of the middleman between my parents and my sisters. My sisters were too young to kind of get the negative side of it, but I was old enough to just kind of deal with it, and it just kind of fell that way. At this point, I start playing sports. Fast forward, I'm in high school in Utah, and I start playing sports, and I really found a niche there. So again, luckily, in his own way, the Lord surrounded me with the right type of people, and I just kind of poured my heart into that. Well, I started dabbling in weed in the off season, and at first very self-controlled. I wouldn't do something like that while I was playing football, which was pretty much year round. But I started, my grades started slipping, my school attendance started slipping, and I think the way my parents tell me, it took a lot of pushing for me to even graduate high school, which I was always a straight A student, but I started caring less and less. I started getting more involved with drinking, smoking weed at first. I got a scholarship to play at a junior college, and then once my parents left me there, I just was like, you know what, I don't even want to go to school anymore. So I dropped out. All I wanted to do was drink, party, and smoke weed. So I tried to get a job and couldn't hold a job because I was I didn't have the discipline and consistency to keep a job. I was just too focused on doing drugs and drinking. In reality, I was just trying to self-medicate. I felt like I was trying to find a place where I belong, and so I thought that the person that I was while I was high or drunk was more likable than the guy that I was when I wasn't. So I was always trying to be high or be drunk, and I had this mentality that I would try just about everything once. In reality, it was a really dumb pact that I made with a good friend of mine back then that I very clearly took much more seriously than he did. And, it's a shame because if I had put that in a different direction, then it could have been a lot better. But, that's not my story. That's not the way my story went. Anyways, so I ended up dropping out of college. I ended up just drinking, partying, tried cocaine for the first time in the months to follow. I tried, at the time, codeine was really popular. Xanax and Adderall started to become popular, so I tried all those things for the first time and didn't really take a liking to anything. I did start messing around with Adderall quite a bit. I liked the way it made me feel. It made me very talkative, very social. And I felt like, at first, it felt like I could get a lot done, but then obviously I'm abusing it. I'm not taking it as prescribed, and then I'm just going to the doctor just to get a prescription for Adderall. And, I was abusing the medical system, something that was there to put to help me. And that was just kind of my mentality towards everything, whether it was a relationship, friendships, apartment, jobs. I was using everything to whatever I needed. I started to become very manipulative, started giving into, the sinful nature. Started lying and being okay with cheating, and I wanted to be loved. So every time I was looking for my self-worth in these relationships with women, but I couldn't be faithful to any one of them. And that was just kind of the status of my life. That's just kind of the way it went. At about 19, I started getting into some real trouble for the first time. I picked up paraphernalia ticket, alcohol ticket, literally just in the 3 years between 19 and 4 years between 19 and 23, I got my first DUI, got an alcohol ticket, paraphernalia ticket, possession of marijuana ticket, driving on a suspended license, and public intoxication. In just 4 short years, I racked up quite the legal background. Suddenly, it's harder to get a job, harder to get approved in places to live, and this really quickly started to spiral. 22 years old, I guess I was 20 when I met my daughter's mother. We started dating. She was somebody that I'd gone to high school with, and at the time, I loved her as best as I could, but that didn't change the fact that I had become all of the worst things that my family had taught me, which was the physical, emotional abuse and manipulation, lying. And it's like I had picked up all of my parents' problems, but none of the good things that they tried to instill in me. And, in their own way, they were still there. They were just buried under all the hurt and just this kind of hole that I was trying to fill up by doing all the wrong things and running around the wrong crowd. Well, after I had my daughter, the stress got very real because now her mother lost her job. We didn't know she was pregnant, but she was having a hard time getting to work. She ends up losing her job. I had to pick up a second job and started looking at a third so that I could pay the bills. And I get introduced to methamphetamine for the first time. I was about 23 years old. And man, up until this point, I had tried different things. But when I tried methamphetamine for the first time, it it just took a hold of my life by storm. Nothing had ever done that. You know, it grabbed a hold of me, and it just was not going to let go. And at first, I was a binge user. I would disappear for weekends at a time and then come back, lose my job, obviously, because I couldn't hold it. Life became unmanageable. Ava's mother, my daughter's mother, found out, and she left me naturally. Ava and I came to my parents' house, and I told them what was going on. At first, we tried to handle it in the home. You know, we tried to find an answer at home, and it was, you know, my parents felt somewhat responsible, I think, and they tried the best they can to try and help me, and that only lasted a few months before I was sneaking out and abusing their trust too. And then I tried staying with my sisters. That lasted about 2 or 3 weeks, and then for the first time ever, I started going to rehab. 24 years old. I lasted 2 weeks at a medical facility. Very comfortable, very nice. It's just for the level of addiction that I was in, that just wasn't going to work for me. I needed something much more extensive. I needed a deeper answer, because the truth is what I was doing with drugs is I was self-medicating. I was lost. I was absolutely lost, and I was empty inside, and until I had that deep healing, I was not going to stop using drugs. I just wasn't going to stop. And I mean, I think that I was conscious enough of that fact, but at the same time, I had no idea what the heck I was looking for. I had absolutely no idea where to go to find the answers I was looking for. I wanted to find purpose and family in a place I belonged. I wanted to find myself, and I had no idea where to start. And then I remember I was 24 years old. It was February 2017. And my dad had told me about this place called Teen Challenge. Pause. A very big part of this whole journey, my mother called me, and she's like, hey, I think it's important, but your biological father's in New York, and I think that it's really important that you meet him. And you know, he had been like a reoccurring figure over the phone here and there, but you know, he had reached out on Facebook sometimes, and I don't know, I just didn't see the need or the desire. And you know, at this point I was so desperate for answers, I was just taking any answer anybody gave me, especially if it was from my parents. So I flew to New York, and I spent a month with my biological father, and to my surprise, you know, he's a great guy. It wasn't that he was a terrible person or that he abandoned me. It's just that I had come to America. He was in Dominican Republic, and I think even a phone call was an obscene amount of money, and people in Dominican Republic, they just don't have a lot of money. That's just not, there's not a commodity out there, you know. And he's a good man. He's an engineer, but strong faith, believes in the Lord, prays every night, and I think in a way that kind of deflated one of my arguments too, because I met this man, and after meeting him, I couldn't be mad at him. He was just a good dude, and you know, he did the best he could. You know, so I had nowhere to take my anger but at myself, and I was like, man, I have to go. And I left. Throughout this process, my parents have been doing what all good parents do, which is finding help. They were trying to find answers, and and it's funny because one of my mother's friends goes to a church in New York, and she remembered that months, maybe years earlier, I can't remember the time frame, but a bunch of young men had come and spoken to her church about this program called Teen Challenge, where they had found God, and God brought healing, and they were restored, and they were able to finally change their lives. Well, the Lord planted a seed in this woman's head that was watered throughout her relationship and faith with the Lord, so that one day when my mother called around, started asking her friends, hey, my son is struggling, where does anybody know a place that can help him? The word Teen Challenge was born and whispered it and came across the path of my life. And that's how the Lord works, you know. You never know what your faith will bring to the life of others. And I still remember the phone call. My mom called to tell me about this place called Teen Challenge. My first response was, Mom, I'm 24 years old. I'm not a teenager. I can't go to Teen Challenge. And she's like, no, it's an adult men's center. And you know, I wasn't willing to hear it, so I hung up the phone. And about a month later, my dad, I asked him, I was hungry on the streets, and he's like, yeah, I'll pick you up, I'll take you out for some food. And I don't remember how it happened, but he ended up bringing me here to Teen Challenge on a tour. It looked very, very different back then. The buildings were much older, and the Lord has blessed this place in a mighty way. But at the time, I entertained my father. He was the only person that was picking up my phone calls at this time. So, I humored him, and he didn't give me much of a choice. I wasn't very coherent. I was exhausted from being up for weeks at a time and barely eating, barely drinking water. I can't imagine how my dad felt seeing me like that. But he brought me here, and I sat down with the guy that actually had my job at the time. His name was Andrew Carpentier. He's a great guy. I sat down, and he humored me. I wasn't ready, but he answered all my questions, and I was downright borderline aggressive towards the man. And he very patiently, and I don't know what it was about this place that it made me angry. Here was this guy, and one thing about Teen Challenge is everybody started out as a student first. That means that everybody has a background in addiction. And so this guy was telling me, and I think that Andrew was telling me a little bit of his story, and the fact that he was sitting across from me doing good for whatever reason made me angry. And because I just couldn't seem to get it. I ended up, I didn't come to Teen Challenge that day. I ended up running the streets for 3 more months. But I will be darned if every time I was using drugs and every time I got sick of using and wanted to sober up, this name just wouldn't get out of my head. Teen Challenge, Teen Challenge. And, I lost my license, lost my wallet, lost about all my clothes doing drugs. But one thing I never lost was the application and paperwork to Teen Challenge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When I left, I was suffering from drug-induced psychosis, from being up for days in and days out. I was hearing voices. Never had an issue like that before, but sleep deprivation, dehydration, malnutrition can do some crazy things to a man. And so they needed me to get a psych evaluation. Well, the Lord is funny. They say the Lord works in mysterious ways. The first time I came to Teen Challenge, I was actually Baker acted the night before. Well, funny story is when you get Baker acted, they do a psych evaluation. Psych evaluation costs quite a bit of money if you go try to pay to get it done. I was running in and out of traffic, high out of my mind. The police saw me, thank God. They didn't arrest me and take me to jail. He took me to Aspire Health Partners here in Sanford. The next time when they released me, I found myself back in Kissimmee trying to go back to my family. They wouldn't answer, and I dialed the phone number to that guy, Andrew Carpentier. Same guy that I had basically cursed out in his office, and I told him, it's like, hey man, you told me that if I got a psych evaluation, you would come and pick me up. Well, I got it. I did what you asked me to do. And he was like, okay, well, tell me the address. Where are you? I was like, okay, I'm here. And he's like, okay, don't move. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Okay. So I sat down on the curb. I turned my phone off. Actually, I turned on airplane mode and started listening to music because I was trying to calm down enough and just got to sit and wait. I was starving, and now I've been sober and no drugs, so how hungry I am finally hit me. And it was the craziest thing. Once I made that decision to just sit there and wait, like, I don't mean just spoke it, like in my heart, I had every intention to sit there and wait. This guy from McDonald's probably thought that I was dying, came outside. He's like, hey man, we had these burgers and something just told me to come and give them to you. And I was like, amen. And he gave me he gave me a bottle of water and 3 double cheeseburgers. And that basically summarizes how the Lord provided for me throughout my entire restoration. Every time I needed something, it always appeared. Even when I was on the streets using drugs and I didn't believe in God, I always tell people, when I came to Teen Challenge, it wasn't to find God. I just wanted to get sober. And it's funny because God had a plan. The guy that came and picked me up, now 3 years later, I have his job. So now I go out and pick up guys in the same situation. There are some times where guys will come through on a tour and I'm like, man, do I see myself in this guy. the Lord took me through that journey so that I would have a heart for other men when most people don't. And it's because every time I see them, same way that word Teen Challenge just keeps bombarding me in my head, it's the same thing that happens. I remember those stories. I remember being on the street. I remember being hungry. I remember the sideways glances people looked at me. I remember the shame that I felt knowing that my parents raised me better than that.
And even with your family, how the thought and the looks of,
absolutely.
because you had said a story about, I think it was your sister, about when you were homeless, that you'd actually slept in the car.
Yeah, so my sister, when I went back home trying to stay there and they wouldn't let me stay in their house, I remembered that my sister, she always left her car unlocked. So I went downstairs and I slept in the backseat of her car. Well, my sister got up early to go to work the next morning around 4 a.m. She had to be at work between, I don't know what time, but she was about 4 a.m. She comes down and I scared the crap out of her because she turned the car on and I sat up and there's this strange man in the back seat and he could barely recognize me, and scared the crap out of her. And I remember the way she looked at me, just absolutely terrified. And I must have looked like death because everybody was always trying to feed me. She was like, "Let me get you some food or something." And I was like, "No, it's okay. I gotta go. I gotta go." And after leaving her, that's when I called Teen Challenge. And since coming to Teen Challenge,
because that was your transition point.
Yeah.
Because it kind of seared your soul of.
That was rock bottom for me.
Rock bottom.
That was rock bottom. I'd had enough. And I came to Teen Challenge, and then I started seeing these guys worshiping, and you hear these stories about guys that, their wives wanted nothing to do with them, and, these horror stories of just what had happened. And then now I'm seeing them up on stage, and I'm hearing the stories about them, but the man that I'm seeing is a completely different person. And that's inevitably what opened up my heart to the idea of Jesus Christ. It was just because, man, I wanted that. I realized that I needed healing. I needed a deep, deep healing, and I had tried other places and I wasn't getting it, but this guy in front of me clearly has. And I needed that, so I opened my heart to it. Now, I would love to tell you that I opened my heart, I said a prayer, and miraculously, my life was changed. That's not the way it worked for me. I know that there are those stories out there. God bless those that did. I was a little bit more stubborn. I was a little bit more addicted to my pain and depression than that.
Sometimes it's a little bit longer walk.
Yeah. It took 18 months from the moment that I opened my heart to the idea of Jesus Christ to the point where I would say I finally had true restoration and salvation. And every step of the way has been absolutely supernatural. I pray that over everybody's life, not just the people that come through Teen Challenge, the addicts, but just everybody's life, because I went on to graduate Teen Challenge the first time and I went out and relapsed. And man, I was saying all the right things. I had memorized the scriptures, I had done the prayers, I had gotten baptized, and I wholeheartedly wanted to be in a relationship with God, but it was part of my breaking process. When I went out and relapsed again, I guess I had still been hanging on to some things. And when I came back, my mother dropped me off. She said something that was super important. She was like, "Luigi, I love you, and I hope you take this the right way." Because God, I should premise this by saying, despite how much I had put my family through, she still came and picked me up out of jail. My family was always tough on me. And I needed that. It's important to understand that as an addict, a lot of times families try to take on the problem and solve the answers for them. I am blessed for the family that I had, because my family, they did not enable me. They tried the whole come home for a little while. That lasted 3 months, and they're like, "Hey, no, we're not doing this." If my family had been willing to entertain me a little bit longer, I would still be an addict. When my mother dropped me off after picking me up from jail, I called her from jail and she's like, "This is what you're going to do. You're going to call Teen Challenge again, and you got yourself into this mess. If you make arrangements for them to take you, the only thing I will do, if you're lucky, is call an Uber to get you there." She's like, "But that's it." Wow. Turns out, you can't call an Uber. Somebody had to pick me up from jail. They had to bond me out. My mother picked me up, took me to Teen Challenge, and when she dropped me off here that night, she said something that was very important, very crucial. She looked at me and said, "Son, I hope you understand this. I love you, but I can't do this anymore." She's like, this is the last thing I'm ever going to do for you. She's like, I don't care if you graduate this time. I don't care if you leave the program. I don't care if you relapse. I'm done. Please don't call me anymore. Now some might think that that was harsh, but the truth is that what my mother did in that moment is she's like, listen, here's your life. Do whatever you want with it. She handed me responsibility of my own life in that moment. And in that moment, for the first time feeling the weight of my life, I was terrified.
It was tough love.
Yeah, it was tough love. And the very first thing I did, they were having a chapel service. I ran my butt down to the chapel. First of all, the guys here at Teen Challenge welcomed me with open arms. Literally, I remember walking into chapel and everybody had, there was no shame, nothing. I broke down in tears because guys just literally hugged me and brought me into the program. My clothes were tattered. I had just spent 3 nights in jail. And before the 3 nights in jail, I had spent 3 nights in the hospital. I'm 220 pounds now. I was 140 pounds when I came in through the doors. What I had done with my life is I had grabbed it and I went straight up to the altar. I dropped on my knees, and I still remember I cried out to the Lord, I know you're up there. I've heard your name. I've tried to worship you, but I can't do this anymore. If you're going to do something with my life, I need you to do it now, because I won't go another year the way I'm going. And I think in that moment I was ready, because after that, the next morning, just a really good friend of mine, Jacob, came up to me. He's like, hey man, God, this is going to sound crazy, but God told me to tell you this. And he handed me a verse in Isaiah, and he's the verse, and forgive me, but I don't remember the address, but I want to say 49:10. It said, I have heard you. Yes, I will help you. I will strengthen you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Through the deserts, I will bring about flowing water, and where there was not a way, I will create one. And he was just letting me know that he heard me, and that he would help me. After that point, the curriculum here at Teen Challenge, we have this course on forgiveness, 70 times 7, Bruce Wilkinson. I'm sure you've heard of him. And I went through that course, and for the first time ever, I did it, and it brought the healing that I was looking for. I forgave my parents for the childhood trauma. I forgave, most importantly, myself for the things I'd put myself through. And then once I had done that, Jesus had lifted that pain out of my heart. And then, I was still an addict. Craving still happened. It was still a battle. But the pain, the longing, the craving, the suffering that I was putting myself through was gone. I didn't hate my story anymore. I loved every bit of it, even the hard parts, even the parts that I had long since been ashamed of, because I recognized I was exactly who I was meant to be. And that was the freedom that only came from understanding that God had a perfect plan for my life, and that even my addiction, even all those nights that I was lost walking in the street, understanding that if I go, nobody would hear me. It'd be weeks before anyone that I loved found out that I was missing. I recognized that it was all for a purpose. It was all meant to be. And then I realized the purpose of my life was to walk in the way God wanted me to walk. Because if I could get to the end of my life and know wholeheartedly that I became the man that God made me to be, then I could rest easy knowing that everything was worth it. But then I started to recognize that if I didn't end up there, if I didn't close my eyes for the last time and hear, well done, my good and faithful servant, then it was just, then everything was for nothing. All the pain was for nothing, all the trauma. And at the end of the day, I recognized this is the purpose. The purpose is to die, go to heaven, meet Jesus, and hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. And so after that point, Teen Challenge taught me the tools that I needed to live in relationship with God. Taught me how to do devotions, the simple things, you know what I mean? How to know I'm a Christian, how to avoid temptation, how to obey the laws of man while also obeying the laws of Christ, how to deal with what the Bible says about my sin, How to deal with forgiveness. That was a huge one for me.
Because when you have all that, then the healing can begin.
Once you can forgive your past, then the healing can begin. Once I understood that everything I went through, I was meant to go through. It was all part of the plan. I didn't feel like some horrible mistake. Then healing really started. Everything made sense after that. Even all the things that used to confuse me and drive me crazy before.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we get into our own head so deep that it's hard to find our way out.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. I had dug myself into a prison of my own design. I was the prisoner and the jailer. I held the keys to get out, and I was punishing myself, and I just was not going to let me out until Jesus came to the gates, and he was like, "Hey, you don't have to be in here whenever you want." You know what the funny thing about Jesus is he's like, "Listen, if you want to be in here, that's okay, but if it's okay with you, I'd like to sit with you. I'd like to be in here with you. Whether you want to be in the prison or out of the prison, I just want to be with you." And I think I finally had found the acceptance I was looking for.
Wow.
Jesus Christ. He accepted me for who I was.
And he met you where you were.
Exactly.
Because that's the whole key. Sometimes you don't have to be perfect or go through to a certain point or so many programs before he'll receive you. He loves you where you're at.
The funny thing about making it to heaven is you don't get a certificate that says how many times you tried or the list of it. Luigi Paulino, son of God, failed this many times. No, you just get sealed. You just get sealed by the Holy Spirit. That's it. Pass. You pass. Come on in. Welcome to the family.
Sealed in his blood.
Yeah. And I needed that. So I always tell people, Teen Challenge isn't the only way, but Teen Challenge was the place that God used to this was the divine appointment. This was the address that he dated for me to meet him. And I don't know where I would have been without it. Genuinely. Not only that, man, the healing that came in my family after, like me and my dad always joke around now when we sit down and and we're like, the Figueroa family, my last name is Paulino, my family's last name is Figueroa, and that man raised me, you know what I mean? It's the Lord had given me the father that I deserved because he's a great man. But we always joke around like, the Figueroa family had a rough start, but this last half is looking pretty good. My family, my parents are happily married. They went through 2 divorces, but they are happily married now and closer than ever. My sisters, one of my sisters is a UF, studying to go to medical school. My other sister's about to graduate high school. She's about to graduate high school this year, and she's deciding what college to go to. She's between FSU and UF. We don't want a divided household, so we're trying to tell her to go to UF. The Lord brought a complete restoration in my life. My daughter before that I couldn't have a relationship with, now she lives with me. And I'm a single dad. I raise her by myself. I work here at Teen Challenge, and I went back to school. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a doctor, but I had listened to my demons more than my purpose, and I had convinced myself that I wasn't good enough for that. So now I went back to school. I'm pursuing a bachelor's degree in biomedical science so that I can get into medical school and become a doctor.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Forgive me, that's what the Lord put me on this planet to do.
Because we all have a purpose, and sometimes we don't see that.
All part of my story. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it'll be a story of, the incredible power of God to take one man from homeless drug addict to somebody who he had chosen to help others in his community.
Wow, it's all about healing, restoration. And God can do that with the whole family because it touches many lives.
No, he has. And man, I am where we all are now, where my family is now, is complete. I would go through it all. I wouldn't change a thing. If I had to go through it all again, knowing where my family would end up now, all the terrible parts, all the terrible bits, I would go through it as many times as I had to, just because to have a relationship with God, to understand and be fully accepting of yourself, people go their whole lives and are never fully satisfied with who they are and what they've been through. So, me and my mom always joke I was a late bloomer. I went back to college at 28. I'll graduate at 32. 31, 32, and medical school at 35, 36. But
you get there.
Yeah, one step at a time.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you for taking the time to share your story and your testimony. I know it's going to touch many lives. So stick around for the next episode of Watch Your Story. Thank you.